Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Tuesday. It is 4 p.m. ET, and you see me here alone on set. Do not worry. Anthony Horowitz is here, and he will join us momentarily. He is out of the country, out of our country, out of his country, out of all countries on set doing a marvelous thing, and we will bring him on. And there he is, coming to us from the other side of the world. Welcome, 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 Anthony Horowitz. Where are you, by the way?
Well, Hank, first of all, may I say what a pleasure it is to see you. It's always lovely talking to you. I think it's fair to say that we have not just a professional relationship, but a friendship since our meeting in Albury in the United Kingdom last year. And where I am now is in Gran Canaria. I'd like to apologize to everybody listening for being a few minutes late. I was told the wrong time, but then we are juggling so many different time frames here, British and American and Spanish, although actually the time here is the same as in London. We've just had yesterday the first day of shooting of a new TV series I've written, and I'm in my hotel room in Gran Canaria.
This is just a lot to take in, and I'm going to fast forward very, very quickly and ask you, can I ask what new TV series it is?
Certainly, it's a really interesting murder mystery story, quite sort of dark, quite sort of edging towards horror, and the title sort of tells you everything you need to know, really. It's called Nine Bodies in a Mexican Morgue. And we're shooting in Gran Canaria because, curiously, the landscape here is very similar to Mexico. And we, for lots of reasons, we couldn't really afford to go to Mexico to shoot it. But what we've got here is we've got desert, we've got jungle, we have a huge army base that we're using, a hospital. All the locations that we need are right here in Gran Canaria. So I came across last week, and I've literally just been on the set until about 2 or 3 hours ago, watching a plane crash into the Mexican jungle. That was what I was doing today.
Anthony, your life is so ordinary. It's just like what we all do. It's what we all do every day. Let me take a moment to welcome all of you. It is Tuesday. It is 4 p.m. ET. And in the never a dull moment world of crime time, you have found us on A Mighty Blaze here on Facebook. I'm your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 15 novels of suspense, going on 16. I just sent in book 16 after having cut 20,000 words. Just want you to know that. But today I am so delighted and so honored to interview and bring to you the fantastic, genius, brilliant Anthony Horowitz, whose new book, let me show you the real one. That was the advanced reader copy that I read. But this is the brand new instant New York Times bestseller, Close to Death by Anthony Horowitz. You know, Anthony, I am just a slavish, massive fan. And I hope you will forgive me for gushing about you and your book, as I always do. But it's an instant New York Times bestseller, so I'm not the only one gushing about this.
You're very, very kind, Hank. And your opinion means a lot to me because I know you're such an established writer yourself that when a writer, the best compliment you can get from another writer is from another writer you admire. So I appreciate it really a great deal. Thank you.
Well, I loved our time together in Albury, and your wife is fantastic, and I cannot wait to see you both again. But you were talking about, I was thinking about as I was reading this, how absolutely just endlessly entertaining it is. I mean, I just laughed out loud throughout at how smart and how witty and how clever and how meta and how multi-layered this is. Is that what you think about when you're writing, that it needs to be entertaining?
Yeah, I think the most important thing for me is that my book should be fun. I mean, it's why read a whodunit? Why read a murder mystery story? What is it that gets us to sort of, that makes this genre so hugely popular? And I'm always asking myself that question. And it's not about murder. It's not about violence. I think it's about puzzles and surprises and twists and turns and red herrings and suspects. And above all, it's about the fun of standing shoulder to shoulder with the main character, the detective, and trying to find your way through this labyrinth that the author has created to the sort of the beating heart of it all, which is the truth. And to me, that is a journey which should bring a smile to you as you take it.
That's an interesting way of looking at it, definitely, because we read a book like this, is it the fourth in the Hawthorne and Horowitz?
It's actually number 5. It's the fifth.
It's the let me just say to all of you, you can read these in any order, though. If you want to hop out.
That is true. It is a standalone book. You don't need to have read the earlier ones. And as you hold it up there, I want to say to people listening or watching this that I suddenly realized that the title feels a little bit sort of depressing and sort of sad, but actually it's a joke, Close to Death, because it's set in a close, like what you called it, a gated community or something. Here in the UK, that's right, you found the map. It's a little private cul-de-sac of 7 houses where neighbors live together in close proximity, and one of them, a nightmare neighbor, moves in and causes a great deal of upset. And here in the UK, maybe, I don't know if it's true also in the States, but in the UK, we do get very exercised about neighbors and about, we can allow little tensions to bubble up and get worse and worse, and the anger and the fear and the hatred, until it seems to me it seems to be inevitable that round the corner murder is awaiting. And that's what happens here when one of the neighbors, having upset everybody, gets dispatched. But it's the title, I've realized now in retrospect, is a little bit of a downer, but it's not. Even the title is a joke.
Well, where they live on the close, we would call that a dead end. So it's sort of the same kind.
Actually, that's even a better title. I should have called it A Dead End in America. That would have worked very well.
You can use it whenever.
Too late. No, the funny thing is about that close or dead end is that my wife and I, Jill Green and myself, have moved recently to a new house in Richmond, which is on the sort of southwest of London, right next door to the River Thames. And that's where this close is found. I was walking my dogs and I found it about 10 minutes from where I now live. And I walked into it and I was surrounded by these houses. I said, yes, this is where my next book is set. And it's quite fun. I don't know if it's ever happens to you, Hank, where you actually walk into the book you're going to write. But there it was, everything as described.
Well, that's what happens to you, book you, in this book. I know there's you, and book you. And let me take one moment to do a little bit of housekeeping here. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Crime Time. As you know, Crime Time was started 4 years ago by the powerhouse team of Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt to keep us talking about new books and keep us discovering new books and new authors and sort of staying together as a community of readers and writers. So we are so pleased that you are here today. We are in our 4th year of doing this and so pleased to bring you today Anthony Horowitz and his new book, the 5th in the Horowitz and Hawthorne series, Close to Death. I'm going to read you Anthony's formal bio, just in case by some bizarre chance you have no idea who this is. But I know you do know. Anthony Horowitz is one of the world's most prolific and successful writers. He wrote this himself, I think, working across books, television, film, plays, and journalism. His novels, including the current Close to Death, have been instant New York Times bestsellers. You'll know him from Magpie Murders. If you haven't read that or seen that, you must. Same with Moonflower Murders, and I want to hear more about that. The Word is Murder and his James Bond books, his Sherlock Holmes novels, and his best-selling Alex Rider series for young adults, which have sold more than 19 million books worldwide. As a TV screenwriter, he has created Midsummer Murders, Foyle's War, and Magpie Murders on PBS, which won an Edgar Award. He regularly contributes to a wide variety of national newspapers and magazines and was awarded an OBE. And he lives in London, as you heard. His new book, Tori says, now I really appreciate the title. And you must appreciate, too, The Shadow, which is an arrow that has the shadow of a pen, which is really quite
the covers are so great, Hank. And thank you so much for all the kind comments. Kathy, I just saw a moment ago, and other comments coming up on my screen. It's so lovely to be able to be able to talk to you tonight. And I apologize that I've been moving around trying to get a little bit better light on me, because as I say, I'm in a hotel room far away from my home, about 4.5 hours by air from London. But here I am.
Always count on hotel lighting, but we adore having you here, no matter what the lighting is. If someone doesn't know about the Hawthorne and Horowitz mysteries, can you just give us an overview of what they are?
Sure. It's a sort of an unusual idea. Daniel Hawthorne is a detective, a private detective who used to work for Scotland Yard. He got kicked out. He got fired for reasons that are unclear, but are connected to a suspect who fell down the stairs while in his custody, and he lost his job. And he became a private detective and started solving cases, but wanted to sort of get more money. He needed more money and to earn more. So we had the idea of hiring a writer to write books about him. And the idea was that the books would come out and the writer and the detective would share the profits 50-50. So that was his plan. And where things get a little bit weird is that the writer he chose to do this job is me. So I'm actually inside the book. I'm sort of his Dr. Watson to his Sherlock Holmes. And I'm always sort of at his side, or better, or I should really say, 5 steps behind him. We have a slightly tricky relationship. I don't terribly like him. He's quite a difficult person to get along with. But it's worse than that, because I very quickly realized that here I am writing this book about this man solving a crime. But if he doesn't solve it, if he doesn't come up with the answer, I don't have a book. I'm wasting my time. So there's always this nervous tension of, have you solved it yet? What are the clues? Can you tell me who did it? He never does. It's a difficult relationship, but it's also a lot of fun.
I mean, it's so much fun to read, and the whole balancing of it's kind of like forgive me for this, but it's kind of like a 3D chess game, a 3-dimensional chess game to read these books, because, and we'll talk about each of these things, but at the beginning, you have to have a good, solid, traditional mystery at the core of it. There has to be this good story. And then there's the kind
Hank,
of...
Go on.
Go ahead. Well, I'll tell you the second 3 things, because it's interesting if the audience doesn't know about this. So you have this great mystery, a solid mystery at the core of it. And then there's sort of the conceit of it, that book you is really you, that the author of the book is really the author of the book that's this book, on sort of a multi-meta level, that you're a character in the fictional story, that you are a character in the fictional story. And then there's also this sort of other level of a commentary on writing crime fiction and what crime fiction is, and on the story, and how do you get a book. I mean, as you were saying, the tension is that if Hawthorne doesn't come up with solving the crime, then you won't have a book. But real you has a book that we're holding in our hands, so we know we know that it all works. And it's all is it so much fun to write? Or is it horrible to write?
It's enormous fun to write. I have a great deal of pleasure doing them. And the whole idea of this is to try and do whodunits in a different way. I mean, I'm fascinated by murder mysteries. Why is there so much murder in literature? Well, here's a question for you. Somebody dies in your street, in your community, in where you live, and they're found out maybe near your house or somewhere. It's horrible. It's shocking. It's upsetting. But put a murder into a book and it's entertainment. What has happened? Why is it that somebody dying in real life is horrible and somebody dying in a book is entertainment? And that's sort of question I want to ask myself. Also, how are these books written? Where do writers start? When you're writing a murder mystery, is it the murder that you begin with? Is it the world? Is it the solution? Is it just a sort of a you enter? How do you even write these books? What is the process of it? I've been writing murder mystery all my life. I did Agatha Christie's Poirot on television. I've done many murder mysteries, including Sherlock Holmes books and other things and such. Why have I written all this stuff? Why are people reading it or watching it? So this setup with me as a narrator instead of just the author allows me to look at the whole process of writing these books and enjoying these books. And don't get me wrong, I love murder mystery. I am a huge fan, particularly of Golden Age murder mystery, Sayers, Christie, Sherlock Holmes, P.D. James, Guy Marsh, all of Josephine Tay. These are the writers whom I admire so much and I'm trying to emulate. But at the same time, I'm fascinated in shaking up their world and trying to see it from another point of view.
Well, that's what you do in these novels, though, is that you let us into your point of view as the author, examining what it means to investigate a murder on one level, and on the other level, what it's like to write about that murder as if it's fiction. And you also take us on this journey of there's a point in this novel where Hawthorne says to Horowitz, I'm just not going to tell you the end of this, and maybe it's better if you just don't work on this at all. Maybe you just give up. And Book Horowitz says, I'm 40,000 words in, there's no way I'm going to give this up now. So there's the pursuit of the answer to the mystery, and then there's the pursuit of the novel and all the things that go into both of those investigations. Talk a little bit about weaving that together.
Well, one of the things Hawthorne says in that book, which I rather love, is he says, you know what's special about your writing, Anthony? You never have a clue. And it's such a backhanded compliment, which I so love. But I think what we're talking about here is who is the cleverest person in a murder mystery story? It's not the detective. The person who I think is cleverest is the author. Doyle, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, or Agatha Christie. They know who the killer is before the murder has even happened. So they know who the killer is before the killer does. They are so clever. They have this view of the world of the murder mystery as the landscape over which they have complete control. The second cleverest person is the detective, because they are the mouthpiece for the author. But the most stupid, the dumbest person in the book is nearly always the sidekick. This character, Watson Hastings, whoever he or she may be, is sort of on the side there, asking the questions, desperately sort of representing the reader, but never quite getting there. So, for example, Hastings, in Agatha Christie's Poirot, he never gets anywhere close to the truth. And what I've done is I've turned that relationship upside down, because instead of being the author, I'm now the sidekick. So instead of being the cleverest person, I'm the stupidest person. And this allows me to just lose myself inside the landscape of the murder mystery and be utterly dependent on the detective, and to sort of always, as I've said, be 5 steps behind him, always getting it wrong, often making mistakes, in at least 2 of the books ending up in hospital, stabbed or wounded in some way. And yet somehow it just all sort of works. We still get to a solution. There is still the reveal at the end, and it does all sort of work. And what is fun is that everything I write about myself in the books is true. I talk about myself, my wife, my house, my children, my life, my writing, a lot about Foyle's war stories I've written, and my publishers and everything else. In one of the books, the first one, The Word is Murder, I meet 2 of the biggest directors in the world. That meeting really happened. I really was in that meeting. And in the book, Hawthorne knocks on the door and comes in and destroys the meeting, destroys my career, destroys everything. But it's sort of this, I think the fun of the book, and we're back to that F word, the fun of it, is that the truth and the fiction are absolutely they're intertwined in a way they cannot be separated. And the whole murder mystery is working. The clues are there, the red herrings, the suspects, the twists, the turns, the surprise ending. But it's all done upside down. And that's all I'm trying to do, to break barriers, to do things in a different way.
Because because there's still author you. I mean, author you is still present, even though there's book you. And I'm constantly thinking, Anthony, the real Anthony, is writing this. And the result of that is that book you doesn't make real you seem fictional. Book you makes the fictional characters seem like real people.
But in a funny way, they're the same. They are the same. Book me and real me. If I was sidekick to a detective now in real life, I'd be hopeless at it, Hank. I think I can write well and I can devise murder mysteries. But when I read other people's murder mysteries, I never guess the ending. Agatha Christie, I've read all her books and I've guessed maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 out of 30. I mean, it's not a great hit rate. I'm not actually that good at it. My talent is to write these things, but not to solve them. And that's what I'm playing onto the books. And as I've said, there are things in these books where I live. The fourth book is about a play. It's called The Twist of a Knife, the one before the one that's just come out. And it's about a process that happened when I wrote a play which was put on a London stage, and it tanked. I mean, the critics were horrible to it, and it wasn't a particularly happy experience for me. But in the book, that play is the centerpiece of it, and one of the worst critics of it gets murdered. And then I am accused of her murder because she's written a horrible review about me, and my weapon is found in her body, and and my DNA is all over the scene of the crime, and the police arrest me. So what you've got there is this lovely mix of reality and truth, and you can check it out. Go on Google, look out a play called Mind Game. It was on Broadway even, and you'll see that this play did exist, and it did get the bad reviews that I sort of mentioned in the books. The rest of it, the murder of the critic, is admittedly invented, but it's still I think it's a delicious mix of real and fake, always done with good intentions, just to give the reader an enjoyable ride.
But your readers, I mean, I love reading your commentary on why a mystery is good. There's a marvelous, I have a million marked places in this, but one says, the one thing nobody ever tells you in a detective story: at what point does the detective solve the crime? It's a remarkable coincidence that he or she only seemed to arrive at the solution in the last couple of chapters, right? So the construction of what a mystery has to be is so present in this. And you say in another part, maybe I'll just change the ending and make the ending be how I want it to be. Why does it have to be how it really was? So the gears of a mystery writer are apparent in this novel, when in typical novels, the author is trying to hide themselves as much as they possibly can. Here you're saying, here's me, and here we go, and here's how it works.
In other books I've written, my Sherlock Holmes books, the James Bond novels, I'm invisible, and it's important that my voice is not heard too much. I'm just telling the story. I am the invisible author. These are different because you're quite right. I am debating the entire time of the process of writing the book and thinking about what I could do. There's a section in this book, Close to Death, which I particularly like, where I spend 2 pages talking about locked room murder mysteries.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a locked room murder mystery is one of those puzzles where somebody is found, shall we say, inside a car. The car doors are locked. The only key to the car is in the pocket of the person inside. They have been murdered. They're in a garage which has got a locked door and no other way out of it. The roller is down. I'm actually describing what's in the book, and locked room murder mysteries are sort of a subgenre of whodunit and murder mystery fiction, which is to say an impossible Houdini-esque situation where a murder cannot have happened. Japanese writers, look at someone like Soji Shimada. They love the locked room murder mystery. I spend 2 pages of my book saying how much I hate locked room mysteries because they're so complicated, so unreal, so fantastical, so sort of Heath Robinson, that, you know, that the motivation and the reality of murder somehow vanishes. So I spend 2 pages saying I don't like it, and then I describe what I hope readers will enjoy as I would like to think, perfect locked room murder mystery in my book. So it gives me a chance to both present the sort of puzzles that readers enjoy solving, and at the same time to talk about them, to comment on them, and to question them.
Exactly. And even the structure of the book reflects your interest in the intricacies of writing a mystery and how point of view works. I mean, when I started reading this, and I've read all of them, of course, when I started reading this one, I thought, oh, this is different. He's handling this in a different kind of way. Can you talk a little bit about that decision and how you came to that?
I mean, the thing that I most fear in writing, and I'm now coming up to my next year, I will publish my 60th novel. That's a lot of books. And the thing I have feared most throughout my entire writing career has been formula. It's been writing the same book 20 times. So, you know, you get a character like, for example, Alex Rider. There have been 14 books about him. And it would be so easy to spend the rest of my life writing Alex Rider novels, just simply having the same hero, getting into trouble, saving the world, and, you know, etc., etc. And I've always been afraid of that, because to me, writing has got to be an adventure. Writing has got to take you to places you haven't been before. Writing has got to surprise both your audience and yourself. And so in these books that I'm writing now, the Hawthorne series, I am deliberately doing things, I hope, that have never been done before. So I'll give you an example. This is the first murder mystery novel that I can think of There probably are others, but it's the first one I know where the solution is presented to the reader 2/3 of the way through. And you think, so, well, hold on a minute. How can you have a murder mystery where the identity of the killer and what happens next is told to the reader? And there it is on page 200 and something, when there are another 100 and so pages to go. What keeps the reader hooked? But to me, that is the cleverest part of the book, that when you get to the end, that solution is seen in a completely different light and it's turned on its head. And you suddenly, and you know, the book has a double whammy at the end, two twists at the end that sort of, you know, take you in one direction and another direction and finally give you the truth. And to me, that is the joy of it. You get that's doing a murder mystery just in a new way, just giving people something else to smile about. Because that, you know, I'll tell you something. We're living in a very difficult world right now. You know, we look around. I look at what is happening in your country, what is happening in my country, and around the world, and everywhere we look, there are dark clouds gathering, and we need books that will entertain us, books that can provide a sort of a barrier against sort of the sort of difficulties of everyday life. You know, curling up in bed with a good book, to me, is the only way to end the day. It is the perfect way. And that, I think, is one of the great joys of murder mystery. Despite the fact that murder is part of it and people die and there is crime, there is something about a murder mystery that is just, it just gives you comfort in a strange way. Maybe because at the end of a murder mystery, you always arrive at truth. You know, that is what is so great about these stories. At the end of them, you arrive at absolute truth. You think, in a world in which there is fake news, 24-hour news, where there are conspiracy theories, where there is so much that is in doubt, here is a type of book where you read it to the end and you come to 100%, every I dotted, every T crossed, truth. And that's, I think, one of the great joys and comforts of reading murder mystery. And the other side of it is, as well, is that a murder mystery always starts with a community in trouble. You know, in Close to Death, it is a beautiful place in a lovely part of London where 7 people have been living happily, but except something has gone wrong, and now everybody is under suspicion. Who has committed this terrible crime? Which one of us is the killer? The detective arrives, a little bit like Clint Eastwood in one of those little Wild West movies. He rides into the community, and you know that 150, 250 pages later, when he leaves, the community will be healed. Everybody will be living together again. The killer will be behind bars and out of the picture. And sort of a calm has been restored, and happiness. And to me, in a troubled world, that is the sort of book I want to read.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And I'm thinking about that there's a moment in the book where Hawthorne and his new sidekick, who is one of the best characters ever, are in a car and listening to Pharrell Williams' Happy. And Hawthorne says, you know, happiness is the truth, as the song says. And the other person says, essentially, happiness is justice, is making sure people get what they deserve. And I think that's part of what we're talking about as well, that one of the joys of a murder mystery is the truth and the justice that follows it, that the equilibrium of the world has been put back in place.
Truth, justice, equilibrium. You know what I love about you, Hank, whenever I talk to you, is you see exactly what I'm trying to do in my books, and you just go straight for it. And that what you just said is exactly what I am trying to do.
And we're done. Thank you. Thank you. That's incredibly kind of you. And you know I'm a massive fan. Let's go back to what you were saying about telling the end of the book in the middle, because that was such a tour de force in this novel. Because in this book, they look at a case that's solved. And Horowitz, book you, says, oh, that's great. Now we know what happened. Now this is going to be so easy to write. You just tell me, Hawthorne. Tell me what happened. And Hawthorne says, well, you say, what does Hawthorne say? He says, no.
Hawthorne refuses to tell me the ending because he thinks that I write better if I don't know. He likes to keep me in suspense in the same way as a writer keeps the reader in suspense. It goes back to what you were saying earlier. Isn't it a coincidence that authors, the detectives in detective novels only solve the murder, at the end of the book, not halfway through. At what stage, you can ask yourself this when you next read an Agatha Christie, at what stage does Poirot actually have enough information to guess the ending? And why does he leave it always to the last chapter? It's part of the whole sort of artificiality of the genre, whereby you start with a murder, you have the investigation, then finally you have a solution. This was what Doyle created with Sherlock Holmes, the three-part structure: crime, investigation, solution. So what happens if you have a solution halfway through? I one day might write a book where the first chapter is the solution, and then work backwards from that, because that, even as I speak to you, strikes me as an entertaining idea to provide mystery in a different way, to do it. I might write that. I quite like that as a thought, even as I sit here at this late hour in my hotel. It's trying to just to be different, just to be surprising, so that when you finish the book, it's more.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Yeah, I was just thinking, just to see if your brain could do it and what that would mean to sort of undo a puzzle and put it back together. And would it come out, would the truth on page 1 be the truth on page 385?
That is the question. That is exactly the question. What is the truth? Whose truth? I've had different ideas of doing things. Every time I sit down and write a new murder mystery, and I'm writing one at the moment, I'm always thinking to myself, what can I do that just is brand new, that somebody has never done before? And at the end of the day, every detective you could create has been created. Every type of murder has been done. Every motive has been written about. So what does that leave? At the same time, though, Hank, and this is very important, people don't read murder mysteries for a sort of a clever performance by the author. They read murder mysteries because it's the only genre I can think of where the reader and the main character stand shoulder to shoulder from chapter 1 to the end. The main character is the detective, and the reader and the detective make the same journey to try and find the truth. And they have the same desires, the same needs. And if you're writing it properly, they have the same amount of information. In my books, the reader is told everything that the detective sees. If there is a clue on the page, the detective sees it, the reader is invited to see it too. Maybe you will, maybe you won't, but it's all there out in the open. And I love that journey together, hand in hand, till you get to the solution, and then you part company and go your own ways. Now, that to me is the greatest pleasure. And if you saw my TV show, Magpie Murders, on television, it was done by PBS. At the end of it, the two main characters, the detective and Susan Ryland, the editor, are walking through a field together, and they realize that the mystery is solved, and that means it's the end of their relationship. And they, in this beautiful field, we shot it in Suffolk in England on a beautiful summer's day, they look at each other and they just walk off in different directions, and that's the end of the show. And to me, it's a quintessential sort of ending, and where it all goes when you're writing murder mystery.
Well, that's the relationship between the reader and the author, is that when the book is over, I mean, that scene when they parted ways is the same as a reader closing the book and thinking, that journey is over. I'll say goodbye.
Except that the writer will be back. The detective might not be. That's the joy of it. I've got, we're talking about Close to Death. My next book, you talked about, I think you said you'd reached, was it 30,000 words? Of your new book?
I cut 20,000 words, and now
you cut it out.
I cut 20,000 words, and now it's only 100,000 words. So yeah, you can have them if you want them. They're not good.
I have more words in my life than I can possibly need or use. I can assure you.
Let me just go to. Let me tell you 2 more questions, because they're just in my mind a little bit. There's that moment when you're talking about, and people are loving your idea of starting with the solution, and there are so many questions, and we're going to get to all of your questions, as many as we can, in about 2 minutes. But in the moment when Book You is offered the end of the story, in the middle of the book, when the writer is offered the end of the story, one of the reactions is, oh no, that's the cardinal sin of a novel. That's the cardinal sin of a mystery, is to be told the answer. No, we don't want to know the answer. But it's the joy of the author to know the answer. I mean, how many days do we say to ourselves, just please let me know what's going to happen in the end, and then I can write this. so that the juggle for the answer is what the whole book is about. And I just loved that part where he had to sort of cross the Rubicon of knowing the answer or not.
But what's fun about that section is that the Anthony in the book is sitting with somebody who has the answer, and the person says to him, "Do you want to know?" And the Anthony there sits and says, "No, I mean, I can't know. I mean, it goes against everything I believe in. This is only a halfway through the book. I must tell me. I've got to know. I've got to know. Okay, tell me." And so he does tell him. And then, of course, there's a sense of, what can I do now? I know the ending. There's no more book to write. So thank goodness there are further twists in the book that take you in a new direction. But it's still a sort of a terrible moment. This thing is like almost the devil is offering you this forbidden fruit, which is the answer to the book, which has got to come on page 360, not 260.
Exactly. And all of you who will read this, and I know you will, we're talking about Close to Death, the latest Hawthorne and Horowitz book by the fabulous Anthony Horowitz. All of you who read this, who understand mysteries, and we understand whether it's instinctive or experientially, understand the structure of a mystery and how much goes into it, will get such a huge joy out of reading this and knowing that Anthony himself is thinking about this as he goes into the book. There's a moment in the book where, Hawthorne has solved a crime. It is a closed case, and this is what Horowitz is writing about. And he at one point goes to the real place where the murders essentially may or may not have taken place. And as I was reading the book, I thought, oh, this is cool. Now he's going to see whether what he's written is right. And then I thought, no, it's fiction. The whole thing is fiction. The Close is fiction. Horowitz is fiction. The story is fiction. It's all fiction. But you had me just on the road with thinking, oh, with Horowitz, now I'm going to see the real thing. So the idea of being in his book was just a great moment.
It was an extremely difficult book to write because it is so sort of, this is what we're talking about here, Hank. It's called metafiction, which is fiction inside fiction, books within books, worlds within worlds. And so the Anthony is writing this book in 2023, but the murder happened at least 5 years ago, and it's taken him 10 months to write the book. So there are all these different time frames moving around the place. And as you said, in this book, I'm not actually the sidekick. I've talked to, thank you, Catherine, coming up there, love this book, best Hawthorne yet. Thank you so much for those kind words. It was hard to write, but what is uppermost in my mind when I write these books is they can never be hard to read. That is the trick of it. The books are I have a thing I often say, which is that a whodunit to me is like a watch. That if you think about it, inside this watch there are, if you were to break this open and look inside, there are springs and cogs and wheels and zinc pieces and this and that. If you opened it, you'd never be able to put it back together again. But when you look at a watch, you can tell the time instantly. And that to me is how it should work. It should be an easy read, no matter how complex the write. And that to me is part of the joy of it.
And it works so gorgeously in Close to Death and all the Hawthorne and Horowitz mysteries is that they're complex and they're layered and they're elegantly structured, but they're so easy to understand, and there's never a moment where you think they're so perfectly clear. The clarity in the books.
Again, I'm not that clever as a reader, as an enjoyer of other people's books. And I don't like it when I get to page 73 and a character walks in and I have to thumb back the pages. Who is this guy? I know who he is. I've forgotten now what his connection to them, and all that stuff. I like to know who everybody is all the time. I need to be guided through a book because, it's what we were saying earlier in this conversation, that as a sidekick, I would not be clever. I would not be good. I would not be able to solve anything. And it is very true to a side of my character that I've never thought of myself as clever. I'd like to think, you used a word which really made me smile a moment. You said these books were elegantly written, and elegance is what I'm looking for. I love good language. I love surprising descriptions. I like things to be visual. I like things to be, just to be enjoyable, easily enjoyable. And the complexities need to be hidden and buried.
but it's also, and I don't want people to forget that it's also, and I'm looking for a spot now, it's also sort of gorgeous, not sort of, it's also gorgeously written. There's a place where, I'll just read two sentences maybe. The house was still in pain. Both Hawthorne and Dudley sensed it the moment they crossed the threshold, the strange atmosphere, almost an awareness, that always lingers after a sudden death, as if the bricks and plasterwork that have embraced so much day-to-day activity somehow know someone's absence was everywhere. I mean, that's thoughtful, and that's taking us there. And so you have this terrifically funny book with a terrifically wonderful to read plot and a wonderful meta conceit. But in the essence of it, it's a solid, terrific golden age mystery that is also beautifully written throughout.
If I could get all that and put it on the back cover, I'd be a happy man, Hank. You describe it so beautifully, and I am so grateful to you for just getting what I'm trying to do. That is exactly it. And you know, that section is I remember writing it, and it's something I believe. Houses have memories. Bricks, you know, bricks can tell stories. You know, you think of things like Stephen King and the Shining, the way the hotel is such a part of the story in that particularly terrible horror story. And I've always had this feeling that buildings are you know, they are places, they're mausoleums where our memories are buried, and I find that fascinating.
And I love that that's in your book as well. I mean, you're such a marvelous author. Are there more Hawthorne and Horowitzes coming up?
I am, as of this morning, 125,000 words. Sorry to fight you word for word, but I'm writing the third book in the series that began Magpie Murders, Moonflower Murders. This is number 3, which is going to come out next year. And I'm planning 12 Hawthorne novels in total. I've done 5 now. So as soon as I finish the new book, which should take me like another month or 2 to get done, I'll be starting to think about the next number 6 in Hawthorne. I pretty much have a story in my head already. I know the world of it. I think the motive for the murder. I know it's going to be a lot of fun. I know it's, you know, this is how I work. I get ideas all the time. I'm always, wherever I am, out here in Gran Canaria or back in London or where, my head never stops. Ideas are always there. The ones that won't go away, the ones that make me smile, they're the ones I have to write. And I've got at least 2 of those for the Hawthorne novels sitting underneath this cap as we speak.
I love that. I never write them down, because if you need to write them down, they may not be good. If they're good,
100% correct. A good idea lives on its own. It doesn't need to be written down. If you're going to forget it, it can't be that good in the first place.
That's right.
Totally agree with you.
Speaking of good ideas, is there a Moonflower Murders video coming, movie?
Yeah, definitely. We've shot Magpie Murders, you know, with wonderful Leslie Manville and Tim McMullen, which was on PBS in America, did wonderfully well, and we then did a second one, Moonflower Murders, which we shot last year. We shot it in Ireland, but also in Crete. We did a month of shooting on the beautiful Greek island of Crete, which looks wonderful in the show. And I've seen 5 of the 6 episodes, and I really enjoyed it, and I hope audiences will too. It's got pretty much the entire cast from the first season came back again, with some wonderful new actors. Mark Gatiss might be known to people from Sherlock and other shows. He's a wonderful sort of double. He's got 2 parts in the new series, and that will be out, I suspect, at the end of this year, sort of October, November sort of time. Again on PBS in the States and on BBC here in the UK. And if my third book goes well, I've spoken to Leslie Manville, and she's super keen maybe to do a third one. So maybe we'll even end up shooting that one too. Well, you know, one that you never know in the world of television, but it's looking pretty promising.
That is true. Leslie Manville was wonderful. And I don't mean to keep gushing, but I will one more time, is that I don't think I've ever seen anything as good as Magpie Murders on television. Not only the story and the acting, the production is so gorgeous, and the production qualities and the way, I mean, that's an impossible book to put on TV, and yet somehow in the quality of the film, and was all just so thoughtful and clever.
It'll amuse you to know that when we took the book originally to the BBC, they read it, and we had the shortest meeting in the world. They simply said, "This book can't be adapted. No, thank you very much." Cut forward 3 years later, It's on the BBC. It has been adapted and it worked perfectly well. But when you talk about it, I was very, very lucky. My wife, Jill Green, produces all my best work, and she produced that. We had a fantastic director, Peter Cattaneo, well known for The Full Monty, a hugely successful movie back in the day, and a brilliant director. And I'd like to say Murray Gold, who wrote the music for Magpie Murders. I should talk about I'm saying like an Oscar-winning speech here, and may I thank this person and that person, that person. But getting it right. It's not about just getting a good script. It's not just about having a great book. You've got to just strike lucky with your team. And if you don't have that team around you, it's not going to work. And with Magpie Murders and with Moonflower Murders, we had just the most wonderful time making it with people who loved what they were doing. And I think the quality is there on the screen. You can judge for yourself come October, November this year.
Do not miss it, you all. Magpie Murders and Moonflower Murders to come. Just the highest quality production of television that you've seen ever. Anthony, you are so marvelous to be here today in the middle of the night and far, far away. The comments Sarah Blair Brown is here, and Sylvia is here, and Kathy Graham is here. Shannon Hansen is here, Vicki Gregory and Melissa and Elaine, and so many. Grace is here. Hi from Canada. Sharon Carlson person. Thank you. Grandy wants to know, who was the Japanese author Anthony just cited?
Now, I'm so bad at Japanese names. The surname is Shimada. He wrote the Tokyo Zodiac Mysteries, which I love. But if there are two books that I'd recommend to you out of the Japanese write absolutely wonderful murder mysteries. Look out for a book called Malice and another one called The Devotion of Suspect X. They're both by the same writer, Kiguro. Now that's his first name. I can't at the moment, late night here, remember the second one. But that will take you to two of my absolute favorite. Malice in particular. Such a clever book. They both are. Malice and The Devotion of Suspect X. Kiguro Higashino, I think it might be, but you find it and tell me that you have.
Yeah, I love The Devotion of Suspect X. It was really so...
You know it? You know it?
Yes,
oh, it's so wonderful, Hank.
Tender and so sweetly unexpected.
But also so diabolically clever.
Yeah, so clever. So clever. Yes, do read that. Do read that. Who else has a question? I know we have many of them. Grace, hey, Grace from Canada. Is there a new book that you want to write, standalone or series, but have not had time to do?
Well, Grace, thank you for the question. There are many books in my head, and I worry now as I, approach my 8th decade on this planet. I'm, my end of my 60s now. It is, how much time do I have left? But there's a huge historical novel I want to write. There is a thriller that's in my head I want to do. I've mentioned already, but there are 7 more Hawthorns I think I'm going to do. There are still a lot of books I want to write, and as time shrinks for me, I become more passionate about getting these books out onto the shelves. Sorry.
There is a legacy of it, isn't there? I mean, the people who you don't know will all talk about Magpie Murders, or kids who talk about Alex Rider. You've left a mark on their lives with your books.
I think that's a wonderful thing about being a writer, and even being an older writer, is the feeling that, I have lived 69 years, and I have, I think, brought pleasure to people, and that I can look back, when my last days come, I can look at a life I think well lived. I think that that's true of all writers, or most writers certainly, that we don't do harm. Our role is to entertain people. When I talk about all these books I want to write, it's only because I love writing. I mean, writing has been my life since I was 10 years old, and it's all I've ever wanted to do. It's what gives me the greatest happiness. I mean, I have a wonderful wife. I have 2 gorgeous sons. I have now grandchildren and daughters-in-law and all that sort of stuff. I'm going through the sort of, the later stages of life. So I have been blessed with a very, very happy and fulfilled life. But at the heart of it, from as long as I can remember, it's always been about storytelling and reading and books. And I even now still believe in the enormous value of reading. I can't imagine. I'm looking at you, Hank. Here I am with a blank wall behind me in my hotel, but look at all the books stretching out behind you to the horizon. And I think so there is someone who is well read and who loves books in the way that I do. I can't imagine a life without that, without books and reading and stories, whether it's, Dickens, one of my greatest loves incidentally, or whether it is Stephen King or Agatha Christie or whoever. the pleasure I have had from reading and the pleasure I hope I have given from writing really have been the definition of my life.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Well, you have many more books to write and much time to do it. London says just added 7 books from Anthony to my TBR. That's good. We have time
I'm
for 2
tempted
more.
to London, only 63 others to go. But yes, it's
That's good.
53 others, 50, so many books. But I'm so grateful to you. Thank you. And any plans for a TV series based on these books? Vicky, we are talking about it. Again, my wife, Jill Green, who has produced so much of my work. We did Foyle's War together for 15 years, and she has produced Magpie Murders and Moonflower Murders and other shows we've done together, is at this very moment talking to actors and to, to streamers and to TV production company, to, people who show TV about doing the Hawthorne series. And I think there is once Jill gets her teeth into something, it nearly always happens. So I am very hopeful.
That's marvelous. I mean, when you think about a difficulty, and when I'm thinking about how you would do this with you in it or with
I can't act, so I'm not going to be in it, and that's already a problem. Because if here is a book in which the author is the main character or a main character, but if you do a TV series and the author is no longer there, and I can't act. How do you bring that sort of quality, that meta quality to the screen? I have some ideas, though. I think we can do it. It just means rethinking it and doing it in a slightly different way.
Take this picture in the back of the book and just put somebody else's picture there. And then it would be
that's pretty much it.
That would be the actor. And then that becomes the person. That would work.
Very good.
Margaret in the back room is nudging us that the time is up. It is time for giveaway time, you all. It's been marvelous to see you all. Hey, Rob, and hey, Sharon. Here is the book, and here is the wheel of fun that we will now spin to see who is the lucky winner of a copy of Close to Death. Not this one. I'm keeping this. But the winner of the other one is Liz Havens.
Liz Havens. Well done, Liz.
Congratulations, Liz. And if you will get some instructions on how to email me, and we will in turn email Anthony's people, and they will get you this novel. Congratulations. The rest of you, you know what to do. Run, click, 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 and get Close to Death. This is the 5th in the Horowitz and Hawthorne novels. You can read them in any order. They are absolutely standalones. So go grab this, and then I dare you to resist the others. You will absolutely love it. Anthony, thank you so much for being here from far, far away.
Hank, it is such a pleasure to see you again. I hope we will come back to the UK very soon, and we can have more fish and chips in Albro or whatever.
It was a memorable weekend, I have to say. Before you go, let me just point the rest of you to next Tuesday at 3 and 4. We will be back on Crime Time. At 3 p.m. ET, we will have the fabulous book, Dripping Notes, Kate White's The Last Time She Saw Him, she is absolutely terrific, and you will love this book. I could not put it down. And this one I'm reading now. Every time I go on vacation, someone dies. It's also Dripping Notes by Catherine Mack, about an author on book tour who was planning to kill someone. Just what happens every book tour. So at 3 o'clock, Kate White. At 4 o'clock, Catherine Mack. And today we have had the pleasure of talking with Anthony Horowitz about his new Close to Death. Congratulations, Anthony. Give my love to Jill and your family.
And lots of love to you, Hank. And many thanks to everyone for your kind comments on the screen, which I have really appreciated a great deal. Thanks, everybody.
I agree. Remember, see you next Tuesday at 3. And until then, it is always safe inside a book. And we will see you next time.